All right, hello. This time, in a different background. I'm back in Prague. So let's get through another thing. Probably gonna post a bunch of these today. But first off, it's basically the content and kind of the platforms that we're using. So, I did not mean to do that. So let's kind of break down which we already have or which we kind of use to some extent, right? So obviously, the obvious ones are Instagram, Facebook. We have like Twitter, LinkedIn, obviously. What else do we have? Oh yeah, YouTube, of course. That's where you're watching this. YouTube. Uh, okay, and then it's the kind of smaller ones. So that would be so Anchor, which is where we host our podcasts. We have wait, let me yeah, Unicorn and Pump, which is for investor updates. Unicorn. Actually, let me take this and move it down so it's not at the middle of a page. And there we go. Unicorn, Pump. Move it a little bit lower because I have an idea for how we're gonna lay this out. So put in the middle of the page. Unicorn Pump, YouTube. We covered that. Oh, and then we have the also we have a Twitch account that we don't really use. We have a Quora account that just kind of exists. We have a StockTwits account, and of course we have TikTok. Almost forgot about that. TikTok. Now, what we're going to talk about today is basically the content structure, like what content goes where. Because one of the things that was commented on quite a bit is both kind of use the social media and all these different channels as more of a funnel into kind of getting more of that communication flowing in. And sorry, not communication, as more of a funnel into whatever we're doing. And also that the activity needs to be slightly higher in some places. Because, of course, we post on Instagram and Facebook pretty regularly, but for example, LinkedIn, Twitter, and some of those get a little bit more overlooked. So what I'm going to kind of going through here, now that I listed all the platforms, is what goes, what the suggestions are as far as what would go where, and how to kind of maintain that volume of content going out. So I'm gonna turn my iPad a little bit for your screen. That's not gonna turn, but it's just gonna make it a little bit easier for me to write. But I'm gonna basically, you know, hash it out as kind of a table. That is way too thin. So no, it's fine. I'm sure you can see it. If not, then there's a line there, and that of course also means we need to put a line here, just so we can have a nice little table of everything to get through, right? So we have our the first part. First thing is the core educational stuff. So that would be not be like core educational courses, but what I'm talking about is those posts like the central banking post or derivatives post, the ones that we're currently putting out on Instagram, the ones that you see pretty regularly. I'm going to call them core educational. So that is a little too long, but let me do this. Or educational. It'll take up 2 rows. Hopefully that's enough space. I think it will be. So as far as the core educational, uh, let me use the green, for example. Obviously that will continue to be on Instagram, continue to be on Facebook because we cross post those pretty regularly. And then it would also go on LinkedIn because on LinkedIn we have a surprisingly large following there. It's kind of fun. So that would also have kind of a considerable number there as well. And as far as Twitter, let me change the color to let me do black so it doesn't blend in. Uh, Twitter, I don't think it would be a good fit because the way we do carousels, we would have to go through a long list of them, and we could potentially actually do Twitter threads. So that's actually an idea we haven't considered previously, but I will just add it in here. Uh, Potentially as Twitter threads. I think that could actually be quite interesting. So that wasn't actually in the notes, just thought of it now. So we'll see. We'll have another discussion on it a little bit later. Now, of course, it will not fit on YouTube. It doesn't fit Anchor. It doesn't fit Unicorn. Doesn't fit Pump. It doesn't fit Twitch. or Quora. It doesn't really make sense on TikTok. But the thing is, it might actually make some sense for StockTwits, but that would only make sense if we do it for Twitter. So let's just kind of cross that off for now. So let's continue on kind of the next piece of stuff that we do. The next piece of stuff is basically whatever we put on stories. So that would be, weekly market news, any kind of updates, promoting anything, stuff like that. So basically, just say stories. Now, when it comes to the stories, again, just put a line here, just so it's a little bit cleaner. There we go. So stories is the feature that's going to limited across the social media. It's basically Instagram and Facebook support stories. The rest of these, I don't believe they do. Twitter doesn't. LinkedIn used to, but they no longer do. YouTube doesn't because YouTube's kind of the story thing is basically a TikTok. Anchor has no support for stories, neither does Unicorn or Pump. Twitch doesn't either. Quora, StockTwits, and TikTok. None of those do. Now, next one is more of a kind of short bit that I have here in the notes, which is just cross sharing of podcast episodes. So that would be kind of a promote the podcast. Because, for example, promoting the podcast, like each podcast episode directly on Instagram doesn't make sense because that would require a separate post just for each episode, which would be a ton of volume of kind of relatively spammy. But Facebook, for example, or LinkedIn, they actually let you kind of play it within it. So it makes it a little bit of a smoother experience because you can actually put a link in. So, podcast. Actually, I wrote that kind of weirdly. Let me rewrite that. Podcast episode promo. This wire, like I have it right here, like right where my pen is. That's slightly annoying. So sorry about that. Because it kind of keeps on hitting it a little bit as I type in that corner. But anyway, so as far as Instagram, as I mentioned, that doesn't really fit in there. We would put it on stories, which is where that might kind of fit in. Like, ooh, we have a new episode out, but it wouldn't be kind of a full post, which is what this is referring to. Now, of course, Facebook would have that. I think for Twitter, because it is slightly more kind of focused on being kind of a discussion space, having a straight up episode post wouldn't really be a great fit. We can kind of look at it in the future, but that was kind of that decision there that we discussed it. LinkedIn, that's an obvious yes. YouTube, Anchor, all the rest of those don't really make sense to put them on. With the exception of that, with TikTok, we could do short promo snippets, but this would more of a be kind of a long-term thing. And also we could do those for YouTube as well, of course, because it supports the same weird thing, short promo snippets, which would also let us do it on Instagram in that reel side, short promo snippets. But for the rest of these, Twitter doesn't really fit that. Anchor is where we post them, kind of that main platform for that. So that doesn't make sense. Unicorn and Pump, of course not. Twitch, no. Quora, no. StockTwits, no. So kind of continuing on from there, the next part is kind of more of the business side content. Because one of the feedbacks and suggestions that we got was go a little bit further with how much we communicate. Of course, as we're trying to be very transparent, so we put out a ton of stuff out there. Like these videos themselves, they're on YouTube, so people can watch them if they're interested. But try to kind of expand on that a little bit more, give more frequent updates from that side instead of just putting them on Pump and Unicorn, which are kind of the investor side places. So that's why I put them. So more of that kind of business content going here, more business side content. All right, let's go back to standard size. Let me add the line in and let's kind of walk through them. So this would, it's like Instagram, that's much more of that kind of educational audience. So it wouldn't like, in stories, some of that might go, but that's kind of what we already talked about. Facebook, again, Facebook and Instagram are kind of linked together with this. So that really wouldn't make sense. Twitter would have kind of, bits of it. But that would kind of be more of the that would be kind of the short key indicator updates. It's actually going to be the next section. So just to kind of cut it short, so I'm not crossing everything. Basically, LinkedIn would be the main place for this. So you can do kind of the A/B. What do you think? Which one would you suggest? Stuff like that, because there'll be a second one that I'll talk about which is also going to be kind of this business metrics, which will be a little bit more fitting. So let me just jump into it, just so I can kind of make it clear why, what goes where. And then I guess to give it a name would be kind of short key metric indicators. Now this doesn't literally mean key metric indicators, but what this means is basically that kind of super short, high intensity investor update stuff. So if we take an example of, do this. So if we take an example of, like a piece of content from Pump, where it's like, oh, we have a new deck. This is the changes we made, and we're adjusting this. Have a look, right? Or when we during this week of actually, going over feedback and really trying to critically evaluate it and see how we can best adjust based off of it. That was also another thing that kind of went, mentioned on Pump. People can kind of look at it because it is a network of investors. So that stuff would be kind of the short key indicator ones. Now that would obviously great, that's great for Twitter for anyone kind of interested what we're doing there. Uh, LinkedIn is a little bit too long form, so LinkedIn, that's why it would have more of a kind of that business content side, because LinkedIn really isn't great for like a 100 200 character update. That really wouldn't fit it as well. Then obviously Unicorn and Pump, those would match that because that's literally what they exist for. That's their primary Twitter, their primary purpose. But then like TikTok, StockWits, none of that really makes sense. I think depending on the update, if it's more of kind of visual as well, so LinkedIn could kind of have it, but I guess to put an asterisk here with that. So that's kind of what I was talking about. That really, it doesn't make sense for Instagram, doesn't make sense for Facebook. The long ones, obviously, that doesn't fit on Twitter, YouTube, Anchor. Unicorn and Pump are very much focused on that short form kind of Twitter style updates, so that wouldn't work either. Twitch, no, no, no. TikTok potentially down the line. It could be cool to give up. It could cool. Like this would really have to kind of blend. So maybe future, because we could kind of position it a little bit more future to include stuff there. Like do TikTok, because there's if you look around a bit TikTok, there's people who are literally kind of run businesses around it and they kind of give updates all about what they're actually doing on TikTok. So potentially down the line that is something we could implement. But we do have a lot of other stuff going on, so it would be a lot to try to kind of roll that out in full from zero. So let's kind of make a note there that it is for the future. The next one, that's live streams. So live streams can be the stuff we mentioned with the podcasts, that kind of tying in. Because of course to actually join and interact, you would go through, it would be like, hey, go to the Discord, but it would be streamed live so people could actually access it that way, for actually the consumption side. So of course, live streams would be live on the places where we can be live and within reason. For example, Instagram, it's very annoying to try to be live on Instagram. You have to have it dedicated through the device, so we're not doing that. But Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, those are basically the main ones. I think since we're not using Twitch for anything else right now, it doesn't make sense to just try to kind of force in the live streams for that because they're not frequent enough to have their own kind of a content place. So it's better to aggregate those people within YouTube. But otherwise, that's basically it. Because also TikTok, kind of same thing. You can't live stream to it from our current platform, so we couldn't just kind of do a cross thing there. But they say they are coming with it. So let's just cross first these that don't really make sense there. Possible. So let's just say tech limited, because that would be interesting if we were doing it there. And Instagram is kind of the same thing. They're also kind of tech limited where they require you to use the actual device. So we can kind of block those off as, yeah, if they enable it, sure, that would be great. That would be a great thing we could use. Now continuing on from there, we have basically the podcasts. So let's put that here. So our actual podcast themselves would, of course, be on Anchor because that's where we host all our podcasts. Now where is Anchor? Because I blanked. There we go. Now, as I mentioned, cross promotion and all that would be on other platforms as well. But potentially, some of the podcast that videos, for example, the interviews, stuff like that, those would also exist on YouTube Well, actually, those are basically live stream. So what I'll do is I'll take this black live stream pods. So any kind of podcast that gets live stream, of course, goes to those 4 places as well. But as far as the rest of it, no, 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 no. So that's basically kind of that podcast content there. Because if it is like the interviews that we can talk about live streaming, some of the stuff like that, then of course those can be there. Now, continuing on to what is kind of the last section, which I kind of called all news, but that's basically all kinds of updates for anything. And this is very specific for Twitter. It is, like news about us, news about product, news about all kinds of shit, actually discussing the news, our kind of opinion pieces. Just really use Twitter as a kind of a more of a like a place to give updates that we then try to have people interact with. Now, the thing with Twitter, and it does kind of stand out as a little bit. One sec, let me just cross these out just because it will bother me knowing that they're not yet because I am a little broken that way. Anyway, so the thing with Twitter, and I think Twitter is a little bit different than some of the rest of these, is there's a lot of kind of investors and stuff and activity around that happens through Twitter. There's deals that get dealt through Twitter. A lot of the discovery happens through Twitter. So Twitter is a relatively important platform. So when it comes to Twitter, one of the kind of notes that we kind of discussed is that I'll just basically try to have everyone on Twitter. Now, of course, having everyone on Twitter is a big ask. So I'm not going to say you all have to use Twitter. But ideally, if you do have a Twitter account, you want to kind of interact with some of it, you can put like, oh, currently working at Fair, or whatever. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but just having that activity there flowing around startups and things like that is super useful. So that would definitely be great. So just follow whatever Twitter accounts of everyone else at Fair, if as long as you don't mind, of course. But the big part to this is that like I've already been trying to use Twitter actively more, like relatively, but that basically me, Sarah. Well, I discussed this with Sarah. Hopefully, also Archie, since I noticed him using it more, and he is kind of fitting on that content side, and then Hussein, who fits in with him, kind of running some of the discordance. I cannot fucking spell his name. Jesus Christ, I am very sorry. Let me delete that and write it again. Huseyin. Is that right? I think that's right. Yeah. All right. So just saying. Sorry, my bad, dude. But basically, try to have everyone on Twitter, particularly. I can't type. Why is my thing not typing? Okay, I don't know what happened there, but particularly, I know the 4 of us. That would be kind of that core. At least try to get that activity there, tie that to Fair, and try to benefit from that a little bit extra for that promotion and interaction, and kind of also have that internal side shown on there as well. So that's the marketing stuff. I'm gonna leave the table here just as I kind of wrap it up. It's gonna be a bunch more videos today. I've got a bunch of things to cover. Just to give you a few examples, I'm gonna talk a whole bunch specifically about Discord, what we're doing with that. Then a little bit about, there's gonna be another one about newsletters. There's going to be a bit about kind of vocal advisors. I also have some other stuff here that's, like a big update kind of discussion thing will be about adjustments to fundraising and a whole bunch of other stuff that we've kind of went through. So I'm trying to kind of give the most highlighted ones. Anyway, with that, I'm going to wrap it up, end the recording, upload it, and start the next one. See you this evening. Bye.